Before I replace the stator on this 2008 Suzuki Burgman 400, get a load of that rear tire. It's a car tire. They call this going to the dark side when they fit the rear wheels on their motorcycles, Suzuki Burgmans included apparently, with an automotive tire instead of a proper motorcycle tire. The big idea here is car tires last longer than motorcycle tires. I can see it being a great option for someone who rides a lot and hates spending money as much as they hate steep lean angles while turning. But how does it ride? Like really? Well, I had zero experience with this kind of setup prior to riding this particular bike. And to be perfectly honest, it's fine. I'll add to that, as long as you don't overfill it like I did for my first test ride. Too much air, and the transition from straight up and down to leaning into a corner becomes unsettling, less than confidence inspiring, like trying to balance a square block on one of its corners. 28 to 33 psi seems to be a good place to run it so that the bike rides more or less like a proper motorcycle. Now, is it something I want to go out and push the limits of traction with? Absolutely not, but that's not what it's for, now is it? It's the type of modification that appeals to the sort of person who rides a Honda Goldwing or a Suzuki Burgman. In other words, people who do not care what anyone else thinks about the motorcycle they choose to ride. Alright, let's talk about replacing the stator on this bike. The first step to replacing the stator is getting all of the plastic bodywork out of the way. The only tips I have to offer are to go slow and exercise patience commensurate with your experience level. If you've never done anything like this before, take your time. If you have done things like this before, then you know the drill. It's not that much different from disassembling and reassembling an automotive interior. This is something a factory service manual or a Haynes manual can probably help you with. I found a major interference problem on the forums when I was doing recon work for this project. So even with all of the bolts removed, the stator only moves. One guy said 3/8 of an inch, someone else said 1/4 of an inch, a third guy said 1/8 of an inch. Someone even reported having to pry on, bang, swear at, bloody his knuckles in order to get the stator cover off. Anyway, you'll see the stator cover comes off extremely easily as soon as you solve the interference problem between the cover and the bike's frame. I'll show you how I did that later on in the video. Before I get started replacing the stator, I just wanted to show you a few basic tests for testing a stator. This is me doing a simple resistance test across all three phases of the first brand new stator that I installed on this bike. The resistance should show somewhere between like 0.5 and 1 ohms of resistance across all three phases of the stator. One phase equals one yellow wire coming off of the stator. All you do is check the resistance across one yellow wire and another yellow wire in the three possible combinations. And they should all be identical and they should fall somewhere between 0.5 and 1. Here, if you look really closely, you can see we have one phase that goes straight to 0. Other phases are just completely out of spec. This test doesn't tell you everything that you need to know, but it's a good starting point if you suspect that your stator is defective. This is a good test to do after you've checked the resting voltage on the battery and compared it with the battery voltage with the engine running, which is a basic charging system check. If the resting voltage is higher than the running voltage, there is an issue with the bike's charging system that needs to be addressed. In addition to the resistance check, another way of checking the stator is to test the AC voltage coming directly off of these three yellow wires. You should see something like 70 volts AC coming from the stator. If the voltage is low or 0 and the battery is not charging like it should, your bike likely needs a new stator in order to fix its charging system. Electrical system issues, including charging system issues, are often difficult to diagnose and repair, even for experienced mechanics. If you're doing this yourself and you're not very experienced, just go slow, take your time, and if possible, find a Facebook group or a forum that will let you ask stupid questions about working on your bike. Now that I'm certain that this stator is defective, it's finally time to zoom out and start replacing it. We'll pick up after I've removed all of the bodywork and the bike's exhaust. The exhaust is very easy to remove, so I'm not going to cover that in this video. All right, let's go. So we are back at it again with this Suzuki Burgman and its ridiculous stator, which is a part, it's like an alternator, but it lives underneath this engine case here, side cover, whatever you want to call it. And actually, I've been working on this bike since late December, early January, something like that. And then the weather has made it extremely challenging to do anything. Just zip those out, I'll just do them by hand. The weather's made it difficult to do anything, honestly. Had one of the snowiest, one of the coldest Januaries and Februaries here in Colorado in a while. And that means I've gotten behind on a lot of my work. It doesn't help, I mean, it's great, but it doesn't help that I've had far more demand this January and February than I've ever had in the 8 years previous, which is great, but anytime you get a lot busier than what you're used to, it can become a challenge to keep up with everything, and that's putting it very mildly. I wonder why. The way this is put together, just looking at it, you'd think that this cover would pop right off once you get all the bolts out. Fact is, like up here at the engine pivot, there's a teeny tiny bit of interference right up in here. So if you try to pull it out, it just bangs against that, and you can hear it when you go to pull this off. It bang, 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 like right here. So what I had to do the first time I did this stator, and this stator is defective, which I didn't figure out until I installed it. I just kind of trusted everything, verified nothing, put it in there, and it doesn't work. It's brand new. So this is going back on a warranty claim, and I had to order another one, and the factory part is like $500–600, something like that. I've had good enough luck with kind of the off-brand stators from China that I don't usually worry too much about it. It's always in the back of my mind that it might not work properly. Probably had 5 of them like this in 10 years, so it doesn't happen very often. I probably replace 10 of them a year, 15, 20, I don't fucking know. I don't know exactly how many stators I replace in a year. So it loosens up nicely, but then you can hear that click, click, click. That's it interfering up in here. So what I had to do last time was remove this engine pivot bolt and let the engine fall down a little bit. So that's what we're gonna do. And then we have to get this situated in such a way that it'll, yeah, just like that. So make sure it's on there. Yeah, it's on there. So when I go to the other side and I go to loosen it up, it's actually going to be the wrong way. I'm thinking about it now. So when I go to loosen it up, this is going to have to catch like right here probably, and I'll keep an eye on it, make sure that it does. It's moving in an upward direction. There it goes. now it's loosening. So the nut in the washer off of the other side. Take that, put it with the rest of the fasteners in here. And then this is going to be pretty, well, not tight, but come right off. I'll grab a drift and a hammer. We'll knock that out. Jack and jack it up a little. So that comes out. Another washer right there. Just in the interest of keeping things together, just put these back. I already had this out a couple weeks ago, so it's already greased and everything. That's why it came out so easily. Now that the engine has fallen fairways, and it is it's not really, you'll see. It's not what I would call a complete nightmare jacking the engine back into place, but it's not great. You just have to be really patient. I guess part of the novelty of what I do and how I do it is I do pretty much everything on the ground. I've never had a bike table or lift or anything. They take up a lot of space. Not 100% sure how worth it they are. I guess if you're back or you're not in great shape or you're not that flexible, it could be challenging. So after you move it out of the way, the whole engine out of the way, now we can get to this ugly ass little stator. That sucks. So this gasket does have to, that shouldn't be too hard to get off actually. So we are going to reuse this gasket. It's a metal gasket with what looks like crinkle paint on it. And it's only been installed once, so I'm gonna chance it with maybe a little bit of gray RTV Permatex strategically placed on the bottom and where the stator bolts onto. So now we have a stator. This is all real clean. I've been in here before. It's always annoying replacing parts that are new but don't work properly. But it's just part of the job. Sometimes you end up working for half of your billable rate. Which ain't gonna get you real far, but anyway. So once you have the stator cover off, it's pretty easy. I might try some fancy shit getting this thing back on. At this point, it's a good idea to look for these little dowel pins. Make sure they're still there. Make sure they're where they need to be. There's no need to touch any of this at all. Don't worry about that. What we're focused on here is removing this brand new but broken stator. Without an impact, just situate it in such a way that you can use the part itself for leverage. And just crack all of these. I'm not a huge fan of using impacts, except when they can really save me some time. If I'm hauling ass trying to finish appointment number 1 for the day so I can get going on appointment number 2. I'll use an impact to speed things up. Or for really repetitive things like removing the seat buckets on most scooters. But this sort of thing I kind of prefer to do mostly by hand, although I am going to remove these all the way using handy dandy impact. This also gives me a better feel for the condition of the threads, the condition of the fasteners when I crack them by hand. Put those guys, try and keep those a little separated, although these are really distinct because they're like M5s. So these are the, everything else so far has been M6s and a big pivot bolt. Some M8s for the exhaust. I find the concept of mise en place, if you've ever worked at a restaurant, just a place for everything and everything in its place. As a mechanic, I find that's a really important concept. Keeps me from losing things. So I want you to have all the fasteners out. You have to kind of ungloop that, and this lifts out. And then this one is junk, but we're not throwing it in the trash because it has to get mailed back to the outfit that sold it to me, and hopefully they'll send me my... So at this point, I like to just wipe everything out. Get whatever part I'm working on a good clean. Also need to try and get at least some of this fucking RTV mess out of here. Also, you don't have to worry too much about getting like little bits of RTV in the crankcase of a motorcycle. Its first stop will generally be the oil filter, which will catch it. You can even get, you could like sandblast this. I mean, don't sandblast it, but throw like a fistful of dust in there. And all that would happen is once most of the dust settles at the bottom. I meant to say once all of the dust dissolves in the oil, not settles at the bottom. Anyway.
On the bottom, it's going to do a little bit of wear to these metal parts, but not much. It'll end up getting eaten by the oil filter. In fact, engines can eat all kinds of stuff without breaking. It's still a good idea to be as clean as possible about things. But there is such a thing as mechanically clean, not necessarily fucking eat off of it clean, but clean enough to where it's not going to create maintenance issues or mechanical issues or anything. There's this nice scrub the RTV out of that little channel using all kinds of nasty shit in here. You can always scrub the RTV out of there using like a bristle brush, soft bristle. So now I'm going to fire up an air compressor. I think I'll just fire up the one in the van. I'm going to go hunt for... This thing really has to be lined up. So the crankshaft fits into a bearing right here. Don't try to replace this fucking bearing just because you have it apart. That's stupid. Just feel it. You know, does it feel good? Any play in it? No, no play in it. I would bet a bearing like that's going to last like the life of the bike. If you wanted to replace it, it wouldn't be that huge of a pain in the ass. You just have to get a blind puller in there, pop it out, push a new one in. But we're not replacing that. That's something like that. I'd go 100,000 miles easy. So So yeah, fire up an air compressor. So because it has to fit on there so precisely, if you're off by even like a teeny tiny bit, it won't pop on. So I saw somebody on a forum saying that if you get some M6 studs and put 4 of them in there, and that helps slide it on nicely. So I think instead of struggling with it without the little posts, I'm gonna go find some M6 studs, which I should have some. Little GY6 type scooters use these pretty long M6 studs to attach their intake manifolds. So I should have 4 or 5 of those. So let's go see what I can find. As you can imagine, just like how frustrating it is to install a part that's new, pay good money for, just to find out it doesn't work, have the customer's project get delayed another 2 weeks with another 2 weeks of weather delays, and it's frustrating for customers, it's frustrating for me, but a big part of being a mechanic is just dealing with frustration. In fact, that's like almost the whole job. What really sucks is, when customers get frustrated, when they get impatient especially. So here's some M6 studs that I have. So I'm going to use a bunch of these since I had more than I thought I had. So these are just going to screw in like so. Screw them in far enough where they can't fuck the threads up too much. So once I screw in a fair number of these, make sure I leave them nice and loose. I don't want it to be a big struggly pain in the ass. Also, I don't really know if this is like, get out of there. This is, honestly, in the time it's taking me to screw these in and screw them out, I probably could just shimmy that thing back on. But I kind of wanted to experiment with this. Maybe some of the, it looked dirty in that angle. I ain't that dirty. I just wanted to experiment with this method just to show y'all how that might work, since not everybody's as savvy about jiggling parts with tight tolerances back together. Something I do all the time, but haven't done it before, then this little method of putting the studs in might be a lot less frustrating. I don't know if you heard it earlier, but I'm going to take this and blow it out with my compressor that's mounted in my van. Sometimes that's easier than firing up this big one in the garage. So I'll be back in 2 seconds. So yeah, we just blow this thing out for good measure. Now I'm going to go get the new Stator. This one's a little bit different from that one. Electro Sport, I've actually heard of. And then I've always said a good mark of quality is to just look at how much effort was put into a product. So these Japanese motorcycles have a ton of effort put into them in a bunch of different ways. Everything from how they're manufactured to how the parts end up documented in a really like open source kind of way where anybody can look up a parts diagram and find the part number for like this axle nut, which is really unique. You're never going to find a nut like that at a hardware store. You'd have to get the part number and order it from Suzuki unless you want to have it made. And that all goes into how much effort gets put into these machines. The fact that all the parts are documented, the fact that you have access to that documentation, and then just how well everything's made. You can just tell that Japanese motorcycles are well built. So when it comes to aftermarket parts, like this part came in, I don't have the original packaging. It's like, why does packaging matter? Why bother spending extra money on that? when it works fine if it just comes in a cardboard box wrapped in a plastic bag. Well, a mark of quality is like how much effort an individual or company or organization puts into their work product or what they're trying to do. So when you get things like this that are kind of packaged, like this nice paper has a little bit of design to it. Somebody spent 15 minutes coming up with a little logo. It has a part number. This part number doesn't correlate to Suzuki. These up here do. This is an Electrosport part number. But yeah, you have that, and then it comes wrapped in styrofoam so it can't get banged up in shipping. That one didn't come like that at all. And then, of course, the bag, which I've already looked at all of this, and I'm 99% sure that this is all, yeah, it's all exactly what I need, which is cool. I need a razor blade to open that. One of my rules, I made it a rule a long time ago, is always open motorcycle packaging with a razor blade or scissors. When you start biting on it with your teeth, first of all, it's bad for your teeth. And I don't need any more help making my teeth any worse than they already are. This part looks so old, but an old one's probably a good one. So yeah, this is it's kind of what I would say. It's a lot closer to the stock one, which is nice. So that looks like it's gonna plug directly into the stock plug, that right there. This one, I had to make a fucking adapter for it. Like, this is the plug, that's what it plugs into on the actual stator. That's what it plugs into on the wiring harness side. That's the stock connector. So I rigged it up. It ran, but it didn't charge. Like, not enough AC voltage came off of these coils here. It's always a bad sign when you have to rig up stuff like this to make a part work, though. I didn't feel good about that, but I've seen it work out fine in the past. Once we have this out here like this, we're gonna get this all situated where it needs to be, and then I'll smear some RTV on that, push it down in there, pop the gasket back on. This is not very complicated, although if you're not used to working with wires and shit, it's kind of a pain in the ass. It does have a lot of like junk on it. So anyway, yeah. Usually, so when I blow it out, I make sure that I blow all the oil out of the holes that these fasteners go into. I do have to figure out. So yeah, these are going fine. You don't have to use RTV on these. They're not gonna rattle loose. And I guess they could. Some alternate fucking universe, you can use RTV if you want, but I'm not gonna be that guy. So this is where I will use an impact. Won't use it for final torque, but to slowly get everything in there. That's perfectly fine. Do the final torque later. Actually, I will show you. I don't know, you might not be able to see it at all, but see the wire there? It has to fit inside a little groove thing inside there. And then there's even a handy dandy little keeper here. It kind of fits inside there and holds everything where it needs to be. It all kind of makes sense too, which is cool. So yeah, now we're gonna get these dudes lined up. It was a lot easier to slide a bolt through there first and then screw them in rather than try and push it through all at the same time. So these things don't line up perfectly all the time. Yeah, like I had to squish that one. Not a big deal. So I get this about where it needs to be. Take this one here. And since it's passing through two pieces of metal before we're threading it, you gotta be real careful that it doesn't get cross-threaded. They're definitely not bolts that you want to strip, or definitely don't want to strip these bolt holes. So just make sure they're going in perpendicular to the surface and just get in there. And generally, the stator will only really fit in here in one way. Just be careful. It's just the wire length will only be so long. So it'll kind of make sense. So in these, I wouldn't use a torque wrench. These are M5s, so about right there. That's probably like 8 foot-pounds-ish, something like that, 6, 8. So other ones are probably gonna be closer to 12, which we can get on this, no problemo. Basically just kind of guten tight, if you will. Some, I'm gonna get these guys here, tighten these. Now we need some, I don't trust these not to leak without RTV, so I'm going to put a little bit of RTV on here. Get a nice little smear going on all the way around. I don't have to worry too much about getting a little bit inside there. It won't hurt anything. Then pop this little bitch back on where it needs to go. I'm gonna put another little smear up here. Of course, this shit always kind of makes a mess. It's fucking annoying. Smear a little bit here. And we're gonna take a tiny bit, smear it on the bottom here. Just kind of right here. Again, tiny bit, doesn't take much. Over. That's how we destroy pants. Wiping this shit on them. gasket from over here. And we're going to put, so this thing goes, fine. This little fucker goes on like that. So we're going to do a tiny bit more RTV. Again, no need to coat this whole gasket with RTV or anything. In fact, it would probably work fine without any. But I'm not trying to take this thing apart again, you know what I'm saying? I also might get in there with the file and file that shit down so that if anybody ever has to do this again, they won't have to drop the fucking engine out of the way. But let's see. Anyway, this makes, with the studs here, it kind of makes fitting. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it's whatever. So now, I'll line this thing up with our makeshift studs here, which might be a pain in the ass because the magnet is going to want to spin it different directions, but we'll just get all up on it like this, aim these things. So that's the first one. Second one feels like they're all where they need to be, so that's cool. And this thing, if I remember right, this thing does just kind of, it does just fit at some point. There it goes. I'm gonna take these guys, spin these out. It actually was easier than trying to wiggle until it found its home. So I highly recommend using these studs. These are just M6 studs. You could always use long bolts and cut the bolt heads off of them. That works too. These are the intake manifold studs for GY6 type scooters. I think they're the same regardless of whether it's 50cc or 150cc, but I think you could buy a set of 2 of them for like $5 on eBay or something. Anyway, take those out, put them back with the rest of them. It's a part that you don't generally remove, but they send extras with work kits that I install on people's scooters. As you can see, I've accumulated quite a few extras over the years. Once you get to this point, we're going to go and get all of our M6 fasteners that we removed to remove that stator cover. And then once you've been doing this for a long time, it's really easy to tell like where the long bolts go and where the short bolts go. But if you haven't been doing it for a while, what I do is I separate them out and see how many different lengths we're working with. Sometimes your eyes will trick you too. But like right here, it looks like we have 7 of the short ones and 4 of the long ones. So then when you're looking at the case, you'll notice there's certain spots on the case that are longer away from the engine and shorter away from the engine. So the short sections of the case are going to get a short fastener. You know? You got to be kind of careful when you do this too. Anyway, we got a long one. Long one's going to go right there. We got another long one right here, followed by a short one, and then a long one. Depending on like how filthy the bike is too, when you go to like test it and your hands end up getting covered with grime and shit, like, and sometimes that grime and shit ends up like literally keeping your fastener from like you being able to easily manipulate it. So once we get to this point, I'm not going to use the impact. And this gives me a really good feel for the bolt holes. So anyway, final torque using 1/4 inch drive here, and I will go crisscross. So with an M6 fastener, your torque rating is going to be like, I mean, somewhere between 6 and 12 foot-pounds. That's about as tight as you can reasonably get on one of these, using one arm with a little bit of help, kind of experience. Basically just like that. All of this should fit together really nicely. You'll notice I didn't have to struggle either to get this cover off or to get it back on. These are definitely not the type of bolt holes you want to strip, although I think everybody's been there at least once. No really great ways to fix it. You can try to tap to an M7, you can try to just run a tap through it in general. Again, I'm not being too crazy about crisscross. And even after I have all of these tightened, I will go back and check them. In fact, I'll probably hit my vape for a second, let my muscles cool down, and then do the final check / final torque. I found that if you're using a torque wrench on stuff like this, it's usually because you have not been doing it for very long. And it's very, very easy to have a torque wrench that, you know, doesn't do great with, and now I'm double checking them just by going clockwise. But it's easy to have a torque wrench that does not do great with low torque values. And this is a low torque value. You know, this is probably like 6, 8, 10 foot-pounds tops. And if you're waiting for that click at 6 foot-pounds and it's not that accurate and it blows past 10, and then you start reaching the limit of the strength of the metal those threads are cut into, you can lose the threads before you feel the click. That's typically what happens. And you can try to get around this by buying a really expensive, nice torque wrench. That can help. But even then, I've seen guys strip bolt holes they had no business stripping. So we're gonna put the oil plug back in, pour some oil in this thing. So this next part is kind of a nightmare. It's a lot of like moving my jack back and forth from this side. So I'll start the jack over on this side, then you'll kind of see how I do that, and then we'll start working this guy in through this side where it came out. I'll wipe it off, get some fresh grease on it, and then clean my hands off, and then get an assortment of screwdrivers. If I remember right, getting it through this right side, pretty easy. And then once it's through that side, I can take the jack, throw it over on the left side, and then if I remember right, I had to kind of use a drift or a screwdriver to get the holes lined up and then whack it through. It'll all come together, you'll see. And then kind of this guy. Yeah, and then once you have it now we get in there with a screwdriver and we kind of position it. But yeah, it will move. So yeah, I'll get that slid on. There's mechanical work revolves around nothing else. It's the proper application of force. So something like this, I'm gonna hit it with a hammer and see if I can't get it all the way through that center side. But if you hit it with a hammer and you start feeling like it's not moving at all, this is not your sign to go ahead and hit it even harder. You will probably break something. This is your sign to back up, have a little look-see at what the hell it is you're doing, and reevaluate. Because probably noticed this whole process was pretty easy. So go. And it's like pretty much at a stopping point there. So now, next step, be to look at this other side, and then we're gonna jack it up on the other side. So I'm gonna drop this and move the jack to the other side. And I don't really need that anymore. Wood blocks are very useful for working on shit. These are so oil soaked, it's not even funny. I've had them for 8 years probably. And a floor jack. Not something you would expect to need while working on a scooter, but kind of every little bit helps, you know. So now this side comes up. Keep punching this. Now I need my flashlight. I don't know why I don't have it. Yeah, eyeballing it, it's so close, and it looks like if I just tilt the engine up a tiny bit and hit it, it should pop right on. Like so. So, never had to hit anything real hard with the hammer. Since I've already done it before, it's a lot easier. That's another reason to just not bother with making clearance on stuff like this. But I could see something like this being where on some of them there's enough clearance and the weld for this part, this frame part, isn't fat. And there's no interference. But on this sort of like, you could have one bike, you know, is made in March, another bike that was made in November or whatever. And something as small as that could change the repair process pretty significantly. And it would take quite a bit of experience to know. But it'll be interesting if I ever have to do this again. I'm sure I will. Whether or not I'll have to pop that giant pivot bolt or not. So this guy, it's gigantic. It's kind of like a front axle on a small motorcycle. So 50 foot-pounds or so. I know what that feels like on this, so I'm not too worried about it. And then this guy, we're gonna place right here. It's gonna be kind of a pain in the ass to get that out, but it's fine. There's more than tight enough. Pop that off there. Now we can drop this whole thing. Kick it out the way. Now the only thing I have left as far as fasteners go, fasteners in the blue bin are, got 3 exhaust bolts. As you can see, I reuse these constantly. They go from being hand wipers to floor wipers to bike wipers to until they're pretty filthy. I get asked a lot, like, how did I learn how to do all this shit? A hobbyist for like 10 years and then just decided I'd start working at motorcycle shops because I value mechanical work, mechanical skills. It's something I like knowing how to do. These are problems I enjoy solving for myself. So, and that hasn't, I still get a lot of joy out of solving these problems for myself and for paying customers. So it's a very sustainable, worthwhile, fulfilling thing for me to do with my time, which is what's most important to me. So this is all reasonably, it's clean enough, good enough for government work. So next step, it's a lot easier to plug all of this shit back in if, it's so nice that these are actually the right plugs. It's very confidence inspiring. Unlike the last set of parts. So yeah, those bad boys fit in there. So that's all plugged in, exactly the way I want it. Beautiful. Now we're gonna go through, recheck all these, make sure they're where I want them to be. And they are, so far. All tight, so we're gonna get the oil going on, and then probably start it without the exhaust and see if the stator fucking works. So you're gonna watch me pour some oil. Be a little bit overfull, but it won't be once I start it. And so we're gonna start this bad boy. I'm gonna need my multimeter, check the charging system. Hopefully, with any luck, I don't have to check the AC voltage coming off the stator because we will have what we need up there. Oh yeah, I also have to replace the rectifier regulator, which is on the other corner of the bike. So if it's still not charging, I'm gonna swap that out, or if it's overcharging or whatever. We'll see. Alright, hallelujah, praise the moto gods. So this stator now has the bike charging at 14.8 volts at idle. Stayed like rock steady pretty much as I revved it a little bit, but that's a very clear sign that the stator works, the Hall effect pickup in there works, all of that works. So that's a very good thing. Holy smokes, if you made it through that entire video, thank you so much. That's insane. Hopefully you did the smart thing and just skipped around to find the information that you need to push your project forward. But if you just like the sound of my voice, that's great too. I like comments just as much as I like any other form of attention. The thing of it is, I'm not trying to get big on YouTube, so I don't really care if you like, share, comment, subscribe, whatever. But it would still be pretty awesome if you did those things anyway. So please, pretty please, it would make me feel good for 2 milliseconds or something. Give me a little bit of a dopamine hit, which obviously I need as much as I can get. So for the past 8 years, I've been working as a mobile mechanic in the power sports industry for a little company or business I started called Moto2N. You can book online at moto2n.com, or you can just give me a call at 720-634-6935. I would love nothing more than to fix your Suzuki Burgman or any other scooter or Japanese motorcycle that's giving you grief that you would rather be riding than staring at in your garage. So with all that said, I'm jonesing for some warm weather. It's the last day of February. It's been a really hard January and February, so it's gonna be 65 degrees out. So I'm gonna go make the most of it with one of these motorcycles behind me. Hope you do too, and until next time, you have an awesome day, awesome weekend. Thanks a bunch, bye.